In this tutorial, I'm going to show you all the techniques I use to create a basic photo composite image. So you can see on the screen now, I've got my image, and it started as basically this image, which was a vertical, and you can see that the background is kind of meh. It's a bit caca, really. There's not a lot going on. So I'm going to show you how the techniques that I use to cut it out, to add a plain background, and then the techniques I use to decide on the right background fit for your image, and then a step-by-step guide to editing and adding effects and finishing the entire image off to become a photo composite that where your model looks like they belong in the image. So let's check it out now. All right, so here's the image that I want to create a composite from. And basically, when you're starting out, I think it's a really good idea to try and do your comp images with, say, a 3/4 image rather than a full-length image. The reason I say that is one of the most difficult things to do when you're comping an image together is try and get it to look realistic on the ground. And so it adds a whole other level of difficulty adding those shadows. So I think for the first ones that you do, till you get your confidence up, start with maybe a 3/4 shot like this one I have here. And a good candidate for comping an image together is obviously the background here is pretty caca. There's nothing much going on. The water isn't the color that I would have liked. I've shot at the wrong time of day. I've lit this using an octabox, and he's well lit and looks good. The background just lets me down here. So this is a great candidate for comping in a new background, which is a very simple technique. So the first thing I want to do is I need to isolate my figure from the original background. Now there are super detailed tutorials. I'll link to them in with the blog post on this that cover how to do this using layer masks and the best techniques I prefer for cutting out images. And my preference, particularly if you're a beginner, is to use the pen tool, and it's this one here, and it's as easy as tracing. It feels like it takes a lot longer, but when you're a beginner, I think that tracing around the image with the pen tool is the most accurate, quickest way to do it. You can actually get really fast doing it, and you'll be able to get all those little details. If you're feeling a bit more confident with your cutting out and masking of images, then a really good starting point is to select the magic wand tool, and when you do that, you'll notice that you get another little tab that comes up, select subject. Now Photoshop does an excellent job with select subject if you've got a high contrast image. This image is a bit more problematic, but because I've got very similar tones here in the tattoos, the sky, and the wetsuit, but I can give it a go, and it generally gets me in the ballpark. So that's cut out a fair amount of the image, but if I scroll in here, I can see that I've actually missed this area here of water. But what I can do is I can select the lasso tool here, and what I'm going to do is take away from the mask here. So if I hold down the Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, you see that the lasso changes. It's got a little zero a little minus sign next to it. So I can come in now and trace around that extra area. And I'm just telling Photoshop that we're actually going to take this area out of the mask as well, and just make sure I trace around. And that does a really good job at cleaning that up. So that's something I can do there. And I can come in also on his hands here and just finish that up here. So again, holding down the Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, I can come in and just trace this area here. All right, and basically what I'm doing is just trying to get it as close as possible in the ballpark, and I'm also going to come in and just pick up on this area here. So your comp image is as good as your mask that you create to start with. So if you're going to do a really rough cutout, you're going to be up against it. So I actually recommend that you spend a little bit of extra time getting your cutout right. And if you're a beginner, I totally recommend that you start with the pen tool. It just makes life so much easier. So once I've got most of my image cut out there selected, I can come in now and refine that mask. So I can now hit that tab, select and mask. And what I'm going to come in to the second brush down, that's the refine edge. All right. And we are now going to just come around the top there. And you'll notice that we're getting all those little fine hairs now. I'm picking those up as I go around, all the little hairs that I missed. Photoshop does a really good job. So the pink is the actual mask, and what you'll also find is where there's highlights and areas like that, it's also masking those areas in, but I can fix that as I refine the mask. So again, there are detailed tutorials on this, so you don't need to actually spend too much time watching me cut this image out. But what I'm going to do is now come in and get rid of that extra pink there. All right, so we just cleaned up so we don't end up with a little hole in his head. So I've now done an okay job here at masking him out, and I hit OK, and I will get a layer mask now with that image, and I can place a background on that, and you can have a look there that I've now cut him out. So the next thing that you want to think about if you're just going to comp your figure onto a new background, so you could see that the original, I had him vertical, and he was not taking up the whole frame. So now I've created a horizontal image, and I can also drop in a new background here. But what you want to think about is how the background matches. So the simplest way to start out is just to have a basic plain background. And what you want to think about is the saturation and the color choice. So at the moment, when I'm looking at the image of the surfer here, the background is the first place my eye goes to because it is very, very bright. So you want to think about the saturation of that image and also the color choice. So I can actually change the saturation, make it lighter. I can also make the color darker. And what I'm looking for is something that fits in and also makes my surfer the hero of the shot. Okay, and I'm thinking that maybe something more like a darker image, a darker background works a lot better than the bright, overly saturated background that hurts the eye. So think about that when you're choosing a flat color of the background. You always want to make sure that your figure is going to be the hero of the frame. So you can see that here I can come in, and all I need to do is just refine my mask edge a little bit better and get rid of some of that fringing there. And I've got a decent looking background. So that's very basic, and that's covered in the tutorial on a basic background swap. So that's it. I've got my figure cut out. Now let's talk about choosing the right background if you want to create an entire photo composite. All right, when it comes to choosing a suitable background for our composite image, there is a few things that you want to consider first. So firstly, choosing a background that makes sense. So if we just remove our original background, we got our back to our original image here. What kind of background would make sense with a surfer? There are so many different images that we could try, but obviously the most obvious one would be something like a water background. So we could try something like some surf in the background, and that kind of looks okay. Or like sometimes people like to put their figure in a background that's unexpected, so there's that element of surprise. So we could put the road there, or it could be something completely out of the blue, like this, like a fishing, what is it, a bakery and a burrito shop, and so it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. And then you come back to the background that does suit the image. So think about your background and make sure that it makes some sort of sense, or there is some sort of connection between your model and the background that you choose. The next thing you want to think about, and this is really important, is the direction of light. So if we have a look at my original image here, you can see where the light is coming from. It's actually coming across from the top and from right to left. That's where the light is going, because I can see that there's a shadow, camera left, and camera right is illuminated, and it's slightly from the top. So it would make sense that I look for an image that has a similar lighting pattern so that it fits. Now, if I was to go with, say, this image here, at first glance you think, oh yeah, that looks all right, that works, but let's have a look at the difference in the lighting pattern. So I can see that my original image, the light on my surfer is coming from top, camera right to camera left. If you look at the image in the background, you can see that the light is actually coming from camera left and top, and it's actually going in this direction here. So you can see the shadows. Look where the shadows are. So I've now got a background and a foreground image where the lighting is in the complete opposite. And at first glance, you're not going to see it, and people who look at the image may not even notice that the shadows are the wrong way. Most people won't notice, but there'll be a disconnect when they look at their image. The brain is going to think there's something not quite right. They may not be able to put their finger on what it is, but they will. It just won't sit right. So it's really important that you choose a background that matches the lighting of your image. And so when I come to this lighting here, you can see that the sun is there in the top corner, and the lighting here is coming from camera right across to camera left. So this background here is a really good fit. Now we need to look at adjusting the image overall so that the lighting in the background matches the lighting in the foreground. So that is very, very important. So making sure that when you're picking your background, it matches the light that you have on your figure. And if you're doing something from scratch, then you've got the option of deliberately picking the background to suit your foreground subject. And finally, one of the most important factors that you want to consider when you're laying up your image or placing your model on their new background is the position of the horizon. And this makes a huge difference to how your overall image is going to look and whether you can sell that image. And I mean, that is whether you can get away with it looking like your model actually belongs in that background. Now, let's go back to the original image, and here it is here. Now, what I like to do is when I've got my original is I always make a mark of where the background is. So I make sure that I've got my, I'll create a line and I will mark where the horizon is. So it's right there, okay? So I've got my line and that's created on a new layer. And I know that I've got my horizon there. So what I want to do now is, knowing that that is where my horizon line is, I can go ahead and cut my image out. All right. And I still have the position of the horizon. Now, when I choose my new image, let's say I want to use the road as a background. Remember, the horizon line was here. My horizon line in this image is way out of whack. It's not in the right position. So that's probably why this image doesn't quite look right. So look what happens when I lower the horizon to the right spot. Suddenly it fits in. It looks a lot, it makes sense basically. So I'm going to need to increase the size of my image so that I can get it to fit across the entire shot. But what I can do is play around with the position, and basically now I've got an image that, even though it's weird that there's a surfer walking across the road, just by lowering that horizon line and making it line up, it suddenly makes a lot more sense. And I can try that with another image here. Let's have a look at this background here. All right, so same again. I've got my horizon line originally was too high. So what I can do is just increase the size of my image, and now I can line this background up so that it actually fits and makes a bit more sense, just lining that up. And I'm also going to just rotate that background so it's straight, make it a little bit bigger, bring it in, and suddenly can you see how that fits in? It makes a little bit more sense. And so it's not something that you're going to immediately notice, but that little drawing that horizon line is a really good way to do it. And basically to do that, just create a new empty layer on your image, and you've got that background. You can draw that line there, or you can actually come in and use a guide. So if you don't see the guides, you want to come down and click, make sure that rulers is checked, and that's going to give you these little rulers around your file. So make sure that's checked. And what you can do is, if you just hover your mouse over the ruler, either the horizontal or the vertical, and you can come in and add a guide to the point where your horizon line is. All right, and that makes, and then you've got that guide there the whole time, and you can use that to line up your shot. So that's a good way to make sure that you get the horizon line in the right position when you're laying up your image. So that's a little bit about getting those three things correct. So you want to make sure that you've got the right background choice, the right lighting, and we'll just lower this horizon to it's in the right spot there, and just bring it up a little bit higher so it fits in. And there it is there, placed in position, ready to go. Now let's look at how we can match the background with the foreground, and a few of the things that I like to do to bring the whole composite together. Okay, so once I'm happy with the placement of my background, the lighting is in the right direction for the background compared to my model. What I want to do now is actually match the look of the background to my model. So when I'm looking at this image, the background to me looks is the brightest part of the frame. So my eye, when I'm looking at this image, is going to this area here, which is the brightest part of the frame. So my model is no longer the hero of the shot. So what I want to do is raise the exposure of my model, not the background, so that they match. So I want to just increase that, and the way that I'm going to do that is using a curves adjustment layer. So it's this little icon here. It looks like a cookie that's half chocolate and half white, and I come down to the curves, and what I'm going to do is just I can either just hit lighten, which is lighter, which is a good start. And the other thing that I want to do is make sure that, because you can see that when I lighten my model, I'm also lightening my background. So what I want to do is make sure that this curves adjustment layer is only affecting my model and not the background. And the way to do that is to clip this layer to my model. And so what I want to do is hover my mouse, see how it's a little finger and a thumb, you can see, hover that between the two lines, and at the same time I'm holding down the Option on a Mac, Alt on a Windows, and when I do that it changes from a finger to a square with an arrow facing down, and that's clipping this curves adjustment layer to my model. So now I'm only lightening my model. So you can see it doesn't influence the background. So I can come in now and click on this curves icon and maybe just bring it up a little bit higher so that it kind of matches somewhere around there. Looks good. So now he kind of looks a lot more like he belongs in that background. You know, I could leave it at that, but we need to do a few more things. So the next thing I want to do is bring in a little bit of light across his body, so that I've got the sun is over here and I want it to look like there's a bit of light flare coming across his body. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a new solid color, and what I want to do is create something nice and warm, like a nice sort of just a warm white, like an off-white, which kind of matches the background there. So I've got that, and click on my layer mask, bring in the grad filter, and just what I'm doing is bringing that light across so that it's hitting his face. So you can see there I've got flare. It doesn't look very good at the moment. What I'm going to do is just back that off in terms of opacity, and I'm also just going to just bring it up a little bit more, change the color, desaturate a little bit because it looks a bit wrong. So somewhere around there. So basically what I've done is I've just got a warm white, bit of flare there. You can see that in his, it's lightening up his wetsuit and across his body there, and that's just a little bit of flare, and that gives a cool little look there to the image. Another way to add some light flare to your comp image is, let me just turn this one off, is to add a new empty layer. So it's this little icon here. It looks like a piece of paper with a fold on it. Click on that and you've got a new empty layer. You want to select a nice large soft brush. I've got my brush on 0 hardness. My blend mode is normal. And what I'm going to do is with my color picker, I want like not quite a bright white, but just something sort of slightly under that. So just like maybe call it an off-white. I guess it's almost like a light gray. So somewhere around there. Hit OK. Make sure opacity is 100%. I'm going to start with a flow of around 10%. And what I can do is just brush that flare on. So that looks all right there. You can see that that's a bit over the top, but you can see that has created that look. All right. And then I can just knock back the opacity there. All right. And that creates that little bit of flare there. All right, so that works. And then I've also got my slightly warmer flare as well underneath. Okay, so next step, I want to do a little bit of burning and dodging on the body. So what I'm going to do is create a new adjustment layer. So it's this little icon here, come down to curves, and I come down to the drop down menu and I'm going to choose a darker. Now this time I don't mind that I am darkening both the foreground and the background because I'm going to selectively adjust this area. So what I'm going to do first is invert my curves adjustment layer, which means I'm going to hide it by hitting Command I. All right, and so now basically everything that I've done has been hidden. And now what I can do is come in with my foreground color selected as white, nice soft brush, blend mode normal, opacity 100, a flow of around 10%. Anywhere that I brush with the white brush is going to reveal the dark adjustment that I've just made. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and darken the eyes, and you'll see it in the bigger areas around his beard a little bit, darken his hair. I'm going to darken the surfboard a little bit, his wetsuit. So you can see it's coming up in the adjustment layer. That's where I'm darkening. Just darken this area here, and then I'm actually going to just bring out the definition in the body. So I just like to follow, and this is like you can follow along to the highlight contouring, highlight shadows contouring tutorial. I'll link to that also in the blog post. But basically you can just bring out the detail in the form of the body just by going and following the shadows, and you can also repeat that by adding highlights to certain areas, and that just brings out the definition of everything. So that's just one of the things that I like to do, just to just darken his body a little bit and bring out that detail. I'll darken the beard, I've darkened the eyes. All right. And I'll just show you, I'll toggle on and off so you can see the difference. It makes quite a difference there, and it's just sort of sitting him in that image a little bit better. So you can, do under the chin if you want to. I'm just going to do the sides of his nose a little bit as well. All right, and I'll also do that little line in between and just on the side of the face as well. All right, and so that's just giving it all a little bit more definition. So that's adding the shadows. And the next thing I'm going to do is one thing that kind of finishes the whole image off, and this is how I make the two images look like they really do belong together. All right, the final thing that I like to do is once I've got everything looking right, I've got my shadows, I've retouched the image, I might retouch his skin tone a little bit. Once I'm happy with how everything looks, the final thing that I do is combine all the layers together. So that's Command, Option, Shift E. And now I've got a stamp of all the layers underneath, and this is the entire comp image that I've made so far combined into one image. All right. And now what I'm going to do is go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. Now, for those of you that use Lightroom, this is exactly the same. And if I wanted to, I could actually use one of my very own Lightroom filters on this. So you could use any of the gold member filters that I've given you, and you can put a filter over the whole lot if you want to. So that is a really cool thing that you can do, but I'm going to actually not do that. I'm just going to come back, and what I'm going to do is just drop the exposure overall, a little bit of contrast, add a little bit of black, and I want to add a little bit of texture. And can you see how that's applied to the entire image, and it kind of just brings it all together. All right. And once I'm happy with that, hit OK. And there it is. And then there's one more thing you can do, and that is to add a color lookup. So you've got this in the adjustment layers, and you can come down to here, color lookup. All right, and it's basically just like adding another filter over the top of the image, but this is a really good way to blend it all in. Now, you'll find that these little filters here can be a bit full on. So let me find, I think edgy, we'll do a, we'll try edgy amber. So you can see how wrong the whole thing looks, but you can actually adjust the opacity and just bring it into, like, I don't know, 10% or 5%, and it just gives it all a nice little tone and brings the whole image together. So there it is. That's the start to finish, a basic beginner's photo composite.